At this point, you should have already looked at or seen a video presentation about teal paragraphs, T, topic sentence, E, evidence, A, analysis, and L, link. And in that presentation, you also learn about embedding quotes. So I encourage you to look at any other materials related to embedding quotes and teal paragraphs. But I wanted to give you just another brief demonstration of what this looks like, particularly with a quote from In the Time of the Butterflies, and just remind you of how you need to embed that quote and how you need to format the citation at the end. Because this is important. So I put together this sample prompt. This is not a prompt that you have, but just for our purposes right now. So imagine a prompt that says, discuss the coming age of a particular character. Okay, so I have chosen to discuss the coming of age for Patria. So this is a sample topic sentence. One key characteristic of Patria's coming of age is her obliviousness to her maturing and changing physical identity. So I found an interesting quote on page 45, and I want to use that as evidence in this teal paragraph. Now, just as a reminder, and you can access this document as well, embedding quotes with signal phrases, you want to make sure that you set up the quote by having a proper introduction. You don't just share a quote as its own sentence by itself, but instead you set it up. You introduce the quote, and that introduction of the quote is what we call a signal phrase. And there are a few different ways that you can actually embed that. You can do that just naturally into the ebb and flow of the writing for partial quotes, and you don't need any additional punctuation, right? It just reads smoothly right into the quote. Or you can use a signal phrase that actually has a speaker saying something. So in this case, Jane says, and when you have that kind of setup, then you put a comma before the quote. Or you can have a complete sentence before the quote as an introduction that could grammatically stand by itself, but in this case we'll use a colon that kind of says, hey, this is a complete sentence, and now I'm going to introduce the quote. And so those are all ways format-wise, mechanically, that you can embed the quote. But we want to make sure that in the introduction of that quote that we set up what we're about to say, and that there's plenty of context so that the reader has more to go off of in regards to what you're getting ready to actually share. So I've just go ahead and punch that right in here. So here's a sample. I found a quote on page 45. Now I've set up the quote right here. Okay, this isn't the actual quote. This is introducing the quote. This is my signal phrase with proper context to fully introduce the quote that's about to come. So, I've given my topic sentence. Now I'm moving into my evidence. Again, you don't just go straight into the quote when you get into the evidence. You want to introduce that evidence. So in this case, Patria first begins to understand more about her own beauty when she goes away to school. That could stand alone as its own sentence. I don't put a period, I put a colon because I'm going straight into this quotation. So this is directly from the text. At 14, I went away to Inmaculada Concepcion, and all the country people around here thought I was entering the convent. What a pity, they said, such a pretty girl. Now, I wanted to use this quote in particular, and actually I'm missing it. There we go, single quotation mark. I wanted to use this quote in particular because you may come across this issue when you're using a quote from the text. Occasionally, you might use a quote in which there is another quote inside of the quote you're using. So in this that I've used, I have both the writing of Alvarez, who's essentially narrating what's happening, right? The author of the book. And then I have actually a speaker in the story. So this is just some townspeople, right, who are saying something. Whenever I have a quote inside of a quote like this, then the quote inside of the quote gets single quotation marks rather than double quotation marks. And what may look really silly is here at the very end, the whole big quote actually ends at the same place that the small quote within a quote ends. So I actually have 3 punctuation marks right here. The single quote to finish this smaller quote, and then the double quotation mark to finish this entire quote. Notice that I also that's a mistake actually. Remember that you don't put a period or a comma at the end of the quote just the quotation marks, okay? And then you have a space between the quotation mark and the parenthetical citation, okay? So a space, then you open the parenthesis, no space, last name of the author, in this case it's Alvarez, space, page number. Notice there's no comma or anything separating the author and the page number. And then you close the quotation mark, no space. And you also have no space before the period on the outside of the quotation mark. So I've got my quote, no period, space, parenthetical citation, period. That is how you properly format a direct quote. And then as far as the teal paragraph goes, after the evidence, so you introduce and give the quote, then you go into analysis. So this is significant because ... and you go in and explain. And then, of course, at the end of that teal paragraph, you have the link. This could be linking back to the topic sentence, to, if it's a larger paper, to the thesis itself, or even transitioning to your next main idea. So that's kind of the route I went, imagining if I were to move on to another paragraph, I could say something like, perhaps the most critical aspect of Patria's coming of age, however, is the uncommon challenges of growing up amidst the socio-political context of a totalitarian regime. So that's moving me into a new paragraph, right? A new topic sentence that all plays into answering this prompt. And when you're writing teal paragraphs, just as a reminder, sometimes you're using more than one piece of evidence. So a teal paragraph may look like this, or it could end up looking like this, right? You have two quotes, two pieces of evidence, or it could look like, right? Now, obviously, at some point, if the paragraph is getting too long, you just need to move into a new paragraph, even if you're still kind of continuing to give evidence of the same ideas from before. But I'm just pointing out that you can have more than one direct quote in a supporting paragraph. And in fact, the main idea of one paragraph might end up being the same main idea of the next paragraph. And that's where you use good transitional words like additionally, or furthermore, or more evidence suggests, all of those things that just cue the reader in. I have more things to share to prove my point here. And especially as you continue to mature as writers and move into college and beyond, you might write long papers in which you have multiple paragraphs to support one kind of main idea, and that's common. And so you see that this is just a structure to kind of help you blossom out into strong writers that can go beyond 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraph essays, but can write whole long papers and graduate level theses and everything that you need to do to communicate well to your audience.